The rain had been falling for hours, thick drops slapping against the glass in rhythmic bursts, as if nature itself was trying to warn me not to go any further. I stood there, my hand hovering over the doorknob, listening to the hollow echo of the wind sliding through the cracks of the old house. Something inside me knew. The air was heavier here. It wasn't just the storm, it was the house. I had been hired to clean out an abandoned property on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you only hear about in whispers from people who never dare to go near it. They called it the Walker House. No one lived there for decades, yet everyone claimed they had seen lights moving inside at night, or shadows passing by the windows when no one should have been there. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. At least, not until that night. When I finally pushed the door open, it groaned like it had been asleep for centuries. A wave of damp air hit me, mold, dust, and something metallic, like rust or blood. I stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath my boots, echoing down the dark hallway. My flashlight cut through the shadows, illuminating faded wallpaper peeling from the walls, and portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. That's when I saw it for the first time. At the far end of the hallway, sitting perfectly upright on a small wooden chair, was a doll. Porcelain, with a pale face and painted red lips, her glass eyes catching the beam of my flashlight. She wore a frilly white dress stained yellow with age, and one of her lace gloves was missing, revealing a tiny cracked hand. Something about the way she sat there, perfectly still yet somehow alert, made me stop. I don't know why I whispered to her, but I did. "Hello." The word felt absurd in the silence. The house didn't respond, the doll didn't move, but I swear, in that moment, her eyes didn't just reflect the light, they focused. I shook it off. I told myself it was just my nerves. I had a job to do. I walked past her, but the hairs on the back of my neck refused to settle. Every few steps I glanced back. The doll was still in the chair, still staring. The house had 3 floors, each one darker and colder than the last. I worked my way through the rooms, bagging up broken dishes, old books, and furniture too rotted to save. But every time I turned a corner, every time I entered a new room, I felt it. That pressure, that awareness. Like something just behind me was breathing softly, matching my every step. When I returned to the hallway an hour later, I froze. The chair was empty. My flashlight darted from wall to wall, searching for the white dress. Nothing. My throat tightened. I told myself she must have fallen. Maybe the vibrations from the storm had knocked her down. I started to walk toward the chair, but my foot hit something small and hard. It was her missing lace glove. It wasn't there before. The floor above me creaked. I turned my light upward. The second-floor hallway yawned open like a black throat. I should have left then. I should have walked right out into the rain and never looked back. But I didn't. I don't know if it was curiosity or something else entirely, something pulling me deeper into the house, but I climbed the stairs. Halfway up, I thought I saw movement at the top, a flicker of white disappearing around the corner. The second floor was worse. The air was icy now, my breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. The walls seemed closer here, the wallpaper darker, and the smell. It was stronger, that metallic tang again. I passed a bedroom with the door wide open, the bed neatly made but covered in dust, like no one had touched it for decades. Then I saw her again. The doll was sitting in the middle of the floor, not on a chair, not propped against a wall, just there. Her head tilted slightly to the left, like she was listening. I crouched down, keeping my distance. My light caught the cracks in her face. Fine, lines running across her porcelain cheeks. Her lips seemed darker than before, and this time I was sure her eyes weren't looking past me. They were looking into me. The silence was unbearable. I reached out, not to touch her, but to test something. I waved my hand in front of her face. Her head moved. It was subtle, so subtle I thought I had imagined it. But the motion was there, a slow, deliberate turn, following my hand. I stumbled back. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and died. The room went black. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, my heart hammering so hard it drowned out the rain outside. The darkness pressed in around me, thicker than it should have been, like the shadows themselves were breathing. Then, from somewhere in that pitch-black room, I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't words. It was like the sound of dry leaves brushing against each other, soft but constant. I turned in the direction of the sound and flicked on my phone's light. She was gone. The whispering stopped. A sharp noise cracked behind me, wood splintering, as if something small but heavy had been dropped. I spun around. There she was, sitting on the bed now, her dress spread neatly around her. This time, she was smiling. Not painted, not porcelain. Her mouth had changed. My breath caught. My body wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt something then, like a cold hand resting on my shoulder, not gripping, just claiming. That's when I realized the storm outside had stopped. The house was silent, and in that silence, I heard my own name. It came from her lips. Her porcelain lips didn't move like human ones. They parted only slightly, but the sound that came out was clear, sharp, and deliberate. Daniel. The voice wasn't a child's, not exactly. It was layered, like someone had recorded a dozen whispers and played them all at once. The sound crawled into my ears, down my spine, and coiled inside my chest. I staggered back, hitting the dresser behind me so hard that the mirror rattled. I wanted to believe I'd misheard it, that the storm had thrown some strange echo through the walls, but there was no storm anymore, just her. The doll's glass eyes reflected my trembling phone light, catching it the way an animal's eyes do in the dark. Her head tilted again, slow and deliberate, as if she were studying the shape of my fear. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, and the sound seemed to vanish before it even reached the corners of the room. The air swallowed it. Her mouth moved again. "Daniel." This time I felt it more than I heard it, like the sound was coming from inside my skull. I lunged toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't turn. I twisted harder. Nothing. The wood around the frame groaned, almost as if the house itself was clenching shut. Then, a small shadow darted across the floor behind her. My light followed, but it was gone before I could focus on it. The doll's head snapped toward me so fast, I heard the faint crack of her porcelain neck joint. Her mouth opened wider than it should have, the lines at the corners of her lips stretching past the limits of paint and ceramic. A sound poured out, low, guttural and wet, like something breathing through water. That's when the air shifted. It was subtle at first, but I felt it. Movement. Not from her, not from the bed, but from the walls. The wallpaper near the window bulged, as though something behind it was pressing outward. I could hear it, small scratches, rapid and irregular, coming from every direction. I backed away until my calves hit the bed frame. The doll sat perfectly still now, her mouth closed again, but the noises around us didn't stop. They grew louder, faster, until it sounded like dozens of tiny fingers clawing at the inside of the room. Then, silence. A single tap echoed from the floor beneath the bed. I aimed my phone light down. The doll wasn't there. I scrambled backward, my eyes darting around the room. The dresser, the chair in the corner, the closet door. Nothing. Another tap. This time, from the ceiling. I lifted my light just in time to see a white dress vanish into the darkness above, like it had been pulled up through the plaster. The faint smell of dust and old fabric drifted down. Every instinct screamed for me to get out, but when I reached the door again, it was open, just like that. The hallway yawned in front of me, long and dim, lined with closed doors on either side. I stepped out, and the temperature dropped instantly. My breath clouded the air, each exhale curling upward like it was being pulled toward the ceiling. The hallway seemed longer now, impossibly long. I walked, but the end didn't get closer. Door after door passed by on either side, each one identical. White wood, black iron handles, a keyhole just big enough to peer through. Something moved in the keyhole of the nearest door. I stopped. Slowly, I leaned down, my eye level with the cold iron circle. Inside was darkness. Then, a blink. A pale, glassy eye stared back at me from the other side. I stumbled away, heart pounding, and that's when the doors began to rattle. All of them, handles shaking violently, pounding from the other side, something scratching and slamming in unison. And then, like someone had flipped a switch, they all stopped, except for one. It creaked open just an inch, enough for a thin, pale hand to slip out. The fingers were too long, the joints wrong, bending in a way that made my stomach churn. They beckoned me inside. I shook my head, backing away, but the hallway behind me had gone black. Not dim, completely, utterly black, swallowing the floor and ceiling and walls. The only light came from the cracked open door. I stepped inside. The room was small, square, and almost empty. No furniture, no windows, just a single wooden box in the center of the floor. The lid was ajar. Inside, lying perfectly still, was the doll. But she wasn't wearing the white dress anymore. She was wearing my clothes, my jacket, my shirt, my boots, perfectly fitted to her tiny porcelain body. Her glass eyes looked up at me, and her lips curved into that unnatural smile again. I didn't remember dropping my phone, but I must have, because the light shifted, throwing long, warped shadows against the walls. The doll sat up slowly, each movement deliberate and jerky, as if her limbs were being pulled by invisible strings. She reached into the box and pulled something out. It was my wallet. And inside, where my ID should have been, was a photograph. Not of me, of her, standing in this exact room. I stared at the photograph, my pulse hammering in my ears. The details in it were too precise. Dust motes frozen mid-air in the beam of light, the faint crack in the wall behind her head, even the scuff mark on the floor where I was standing right now. It wasn't just a picture taken before tonight, it was taken tonight. But there was one detail that made my stomach twist. In the photograph, she wasn't alone. Standing just behind her was a man, or something shaped like one. His body was long, impossibly thin, his shoulders sharp like broken glass. His face was wrong, blurry like the camera couldn't quite capture it. And his hands. God, his hands were resting on her tiny porcelain shoulders, each finger far too long, curling around her like claws. I dropped the photo. The sound it made hitting the wood was too loud, like the room was amplifying every noise. When I looked back into the box, she was gone. My chest tightened. I spun around, scanning the walls, the corners, the floor. Nothing. My phone's flashlight trembled in my grip. I turned toward the door. She was standing in it, not moving, not breathing, just blocking the only exit. I froze, my mind screaming for my body to run, but my muscles locked. Something in her stance was wrong. She was taller now. The proportions of her porcelain body stretched, her limbs just slightly too long. Her head tilted so far to the side it looked like her neck had snapped. And then, slowly, unnervingly, she stepped forward. Her feet didn't make a sound against the wood. Each movement was deliberate, puppet-like, but smooth enough to feel alive. I backed away until I hit the far wall. My breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. The smell in the room was stronger now. Dust, rot, and that faint metallic tang again. She stopped a few feet away from me. Daniel! This time, my name came out in a deep, resonant tone, like it had been pulled from the bottom of a well. I don't remember deciding to move, but I lunged to the side, slipping past her in a blur. My shoulder clipped the doorframe as I bolted into the hallway. The blackness that had been there before was gone now, replaced by the dim light from the stairwell. I didn't stop. I ran down the stairs 2 at a time, my boots thudding against the rotting wood. The air grew heavier with every step, as if the house was trying to hold me in place. When I reached the bottom, I nearly tripped over something in the foyer. It was another chair, and she was sitting in it. The same frilly white dress, the same missing glove, the same glass eyes watching me. It was impossible. She couldn't have gotten here before me. But she had. She held something in her lap. It was a small, black-bound book. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe some part of me thought it held the key to getting out. But as soon as my fingers brushed the cover, I felt a sharp, icy pain in my hand, like I'd plunged it into freezing water. I yanked it back, my skin burning and numb all at once. The doll's smile widened, and the book's cover slid open by itself. The pages inside were filled with photographs, every single one of me. Some were from tonight, some from earlier this week, some from years ago. My hands shook as I flipped through them, but then I stopped. The last photograph wasn't of me. It was of my apartment. The lights were on. The front door was open, and in the corner of the picture was the doll. A sudden bang echoed from upstairs, so loud the walls seemed to shudder. I dropped the book and sprinted for the front door. My hands wrapped around the knob, but before I could twist it, the lights in the house went out. Not just dimmed, gone. The darkness was thick, suffocating. My breathing sounded too loud, too close, like something else was breathing with me. My phone light was dead. My eyes strained to adjust, but the blackness swallowed everything. Then, a single point of light appeared in front of me. It was small, flickering, like the flame of a candle. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it wasn't a candle at all. It was her eye, just one, glowing faintly in the dark. The other eye was gone, an empty socket where porcelain should have been. Her voice came again, but this time it wasn't my name. "You let me in." I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. My hands groped along the plaster until they found a doorway, and I slipped through it. The air inside was different, warmer somehow, but with a faint smell of smoke. I realized I was in the kitchen. The faint light from the boarded-up window gave me enough to see the outlines of the counters, the sink, the old fridge. And then I saw movement. The cupboard doors began to open, one by one, slow and steady, like invisible hands were pulling them. Pots and pans slid out silently, landing on the floor without a sound. The refrigerator door creaked open, and inside was the doll. Her head was tilted, her single glass eye fixed on me. In her hand, she held a knife, rusted, jagged, the blade chipped in places. I didn't wait. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy cast iron skillet, and hurled it at her. The fridge door slammed shut before it hit. The skillet clanged against the metal and fell to the floor. Silence. I backed away, my breath quick and shallow. Then the fridge door opened again, slowly, deliberately. It was empty. Something brushed against my ankle. I looked down. It was the missing glove. I stared at the tiny lace glove in my hand. It felt warmer than it should have, like someone had just been wearing it. The delicate fabric was frayed at the edges, but there were no holes, no signs of age like the rest of this cursed house. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until something in the air shifted. It was subtle at first, a faint vibration in the floorboards, like a slow, steady heartbeat pulsing through the house. Then it grew, syncing with my own pulse until I couldn't tell which was mine and which belonged to something else entirely. The kitchen lights flickered once, twice, and died again. I dropped the glove. From somewhere deep in the walls came a sound, a muffled, frantic tapping, too rapid to be footsteps, too irregular to be a clock. It darted from one side of the room to the other, faster and faster, until it seemed to surround me. Then it stopped. I was frozen in place, my back against the counter, when I felt it, a breath against my ear, cold, damp, and deliberate. "Daniel." I spun around, swinging my arms wildly, but the room was empty. My own ragged breathing echoed back at me, and then, across the kitchen, she was there. The doll stood atop the counter, her single glass eye reflecting a pinprick of light that wasn't there before. In her tiny hand, she still held the rusted knife, the blade catching that faint glow. Her porcelain mouth was open just enough to reveal the jagged crack running between her painted lips. She jumped, not climbed, not fell. Jumped, straight down from the counter, landing with a sound that was far too heavy for something her size. I bolted. The doorway to the kitchen led back into the foyer, and I sprinted toward it, my boots pounding against the warped floor. But halfway there, the hallway shifted. It's hard to explain, but it was as if the space itself stretched, each step forward pulling me farther away from the exit. Behind me, I could hear the faint click, click, click of her porcelain feet on the wood, perfectly in rhythm with my racing heart. I turned sharply into another room, slamming the door behind me. It was pitch black except for the thin sliver of moonlight slipping through the broken blinds. My hand scrambled along the wall until I found a switch. Nothing happened. The room smelled like old paper and mildew. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness, tall, thin, lined up in rows, shelves, books. And in the middle of the floor, a small square table. On it lay another black-bound book. I didn't want to touch it, but the air in the room seemed to push me toward it, pressing at my back, urging me forward. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cover. This one was different. The pages weren't photographs, they were sketches, hundreds of them, drawn in fine, shaky lines. Every single one was of me, in different places, doing different things. Some were mundane, walking down the street, sitting at my desk, cooking dinner. Others were wrong. In one, I was sleeping in my bed, the doll standing in the doorway. In another, I was sitting in this exact room, at this exact table, flipping through a book. And in the very last sketch, I was lying on the floor, my chest open, empty, and the doll was holding something small and red in her tiny porcelain hands. I dropped the book. A creak came from the far corner of the room. Slowly, I turned my head. She was standing there, half hidden in the shadows, the knife still in her hand. Her single eye locked on me, unblinking. The air between us seemed to shrink, as if the darkness itself was pressing us closer together. "You let me in," she said again, but this time, her voice wasn't alone. It was layered, dozens of voices, men, women, children, all speaking in unison. I backed toward the door, my hand fumbling for the knob. My fingers found it, twisted, pulled. The door swung open into darkness. Not another room. Not the hallway. Just black. It wasn't empty, though. I could hear them. Dozens of tiny porcelain feet clicking against something hard, surrounding me in the dark. Something brushed my leg, then my arm, then my back. I stepped forward, and my foot hit something solid. I reached down, my hands shaking, and felt it. Smooth, cold porcelain. Not one doll. Dozens. All of them wearing the same frilly white dress, the same painted red lips, the same glass eyes staring up at me. Except, one of them was different. She had no eyes at all. Just empty sockets. Her head tilted upward, and in that moment I understood. The one I'd been seeing all night wasn't the only one. She was just the first. And now, they were all awake. They surrounded me in the dark. The air felt thicker with each breath, heavy and almost damp, like the room itself was alive and exhaling against my skin. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could hear it. No, feel it. One by one, the dolls began to tilt their heads in unison. The faint crick, crick, crick of porcelain joints echoed all around me. My knees locked, my muscles refusing to obey the only command my brain was screaming. Run! Then, a sound. Not loud, not sharp, just wrong. It was the sound of fabric stretching, slow and deliberate, like something inside the dolls was pushing against the porcelain, straining to get out. The white lace of their dresses quivered as if moved by an invisible breeze, but there was no breeze. The air was still, dead still. One of them took a step forward. It was so small, so quiet, but the weight of it on the floor made the wood groan. Another followed, then another, and suddenly they were moving together, closing in, their glass eyes, or empty sockets, catching faint glints of moonlight from somewhere I couldn't see. I backed up until my shoulders hit something solid. A wall? No, it was warm. Slowly, my head turned. The man from the photograph was standing behind me. Up close, he was worse. His body was far too long, his limbs bending in ways human bones shouldn't. The air around him was colder than the rest of the room, like standing next to an open grave. His face, I couldn't focus on it. My eyes slid away from the details, but I could feel his gaze like nails pressing into my skin. His hand rose, long, spidery fingers curling around my shoulder, and in that moment, every doll in the room froze. "She belongs to me now," he said. The voice was low, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't want to know. The next moment, his hand was gone and so was he. Just gone. The dolls moved again. This time, faster. One lunged. I kicked it away, the porcelain cracking against the floor. But when I looked again, it was whole. No crack, no damage. Another grabbed my ankle. The grip was cold, but strong. Stronger than any human child could be. I stomped down, wrenching free, and bolted toward the faintest suggestion of light in the distance. The dolls followed. I could hear them. Dozens of tiny feet clicking on the wood, sometimes in front of me, sometimes beside me, sometimes behind me. The light ahead grew, faint but steady, and I pushed toward it with everything I had. I burst through into a room I hadn't seen before. It was small, circular, with no doors except the one I'd just come through. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, the doll. The first doll. The one who'd been watching me since the moment I stepped into the house. Her missing glove was back on, her dress perfectly clean, her porcelain flawless. She looked as if nothing had happened, no missing eye, no cracks, no stains. Around the base of the pedestal, faint lines were carved into the wood, symbols I didn't recognize. Some of them seemed to shift when I looked at them too long, curling into shapes that made my head ache. I stepped closer, her glass eyes locked on mine. "Say it," she whispered. I shook my head. "Say it. Or stay." I didn't know what she wanted me to say. My lips parted, but no words came. The walls around us began to tremble, dust falling in thin streams from the ceiling. Somewhere far below, I could hear the sound of wood splintering, like the house itself was coming apart. The dolls flooded into the room, filling every inch of space along the walls, their heads turning toward me in perfect unison. "Say it," she demanded again, her voice sharper now, layered with dozens, no, hundreds of voices all speaking as one. The symbols at the base of the pedestal glowed faintly, the light pulsing in time with my racing heart. Without knowing why, I stepped onto the first line of the carving. The dolls stopped moving. Even the air stopped moving. I looked into her eyes and felt something slip into my mind, a cold, probing presence, rooting through memories, thoughts, fears. And then I knew what she wanted. My name, not just spoken, given. I felt it on my tongue, heavy, as though saying it would pull something out of me and place it in her tiny, perfect hands. My throat tightened, my lungs burned. Every instinct screamed don't, but her gaze pulled me closer, closer, until I could see the faint reflection of my own face in her glass eyes. The room around us darkened, the dolls fading into shadow. "Say it." I opened my mouth, and in that instant, I saw my reflection in her eyes. Smile.